What would happen if Izuku took Bakugo's advice? How would this impact the story of My Hero Academia? That is the question I'm going to be asking myself today. And now, before I start this video off, I would just like to tell you all about my new gaming channel called Lord Duck, a link in the description if you guys want to go check it out. I'm going to be posting content in about 2 weeks from now on that channel, so go check it out if you want to see some extra content from me. There's also a Discord link down in the description as well, so if you want to talk to me on Discord, send me your what if suggestions, go join the channel Discord and just DM me anything you want to know, questions about what ifs, or a suggestion. And now, let's begin with this video. Bakugo's words would echo throughout Izuku's head. Why don't you go take a swan dive off the roof? Moments earlier, Izuku had shoved Bakugo off of him before staring blankly at him and telling him fine, before rushing up onto the roof of the school building that they were on. Bakugo would think nothing of it, just deeming Izuku too weak-minded to even think of doing something just so bizarre. As Bakugo would end up just leaving the school, not really caring about what he had told Izuku, as Izuku would look down the ground beneath him before jumping off of the top of the school building. As Bakugo would end up walking home, he would see ambulances rush by him on the direction towards the school, as a teacher had most likely ended up seeing Izuku and called 911, where the ambulances would end up arriving, and they would then try to identify the boy, of course, being Izuku Midoriya. Now, what would happen with this sludge villain incident, as the sludge villain never would have happened? All Might would end up catching it, as the sludge villain had nothing to take a hold of, with Izuku passing by, not there. All Might would capture the sludge villain and wouldn't have dropped it, so he would just take it back to the prison, dropping it off, as Bakugo would never be captured by the sludge villain either. So, since Izuku's not here in the story to get One For All, this means One For All is most likely going to go to Mirio because of Sir Night Eyes saying how Mirio would be a great choice. Now he has a great drive to save as many people as possible and become the best hero he can. And so One For All would most likely end up going to Mirio. So, as all of this would end up happening, they would end up contacting Inko, these just mother of Izuku, who would end up dropping the phone in complete shock. Her son was dead and she couldn't get him back. She was completely confused and not sure what to do, so she decided to call her childhood best friend, or just her best friend in general, Mitsuki, telling her what had happened, as Mitsuki would just look on in shock. Izuku had just been a bright ball of sunshine the entire time she had ever seen him, so thinking he had just been depressed for so long, she couldn't fathom it, as she would end up going up to tell Bakugo, still thinking that they were great friends, telling Bakugo that Izuku had died of mysterious circumstances. She didn't want Bakugo to know what had actually happened to Izuku. Bakugo would just sit there confused before his mind would wander back to the time that he had told those fateful words back to Izuku, as he would just think, did I do this? Did I possibly cause Izuku's death? As Bakugo would try to shrug it off, saying that it doesn't matter if he did, the world's not gonna miss such a useless Deku anyways. So 10 months would end up passing, as Bakugo would end up easily passing through the entrance exams. It was quite easy, as everyone in the entrance exams would end up passing just like normal. However, with Izuku not being in Class 1A, I see one of the Class B people moving up. This would be Kendo, I believe. So Kendo would end up going into Class 1A. So now with Kendo in Class 1A, or the copy quirk person would have no one to stop him, so he would continue on just hating on Class 1A. So as the events would end up passing, Bakugo would be the star of the class, and he just had no one to look behind him on, knowing that there was a constant threat poking by, just forcing him off of the top throne of the class. So, as the heroes vs. villains would end up going, I see Todoroki taking the place of Izuku on Uraraka and the heroes' team. So with Todoroki there, he would end up freezing the entire building. However, Bakugo, with the help of explosions, would able to stop it, as Todoroki would be forced to go in, and with Todoroki's lack of using his fire, Bakugo would easily be able to destroy their team without the help of Ida at all. So with Bakugo continuing on being the star pupil, as the entrance, or not the entrance exam, the USJ event would end up happening. Now, with the shipwreck incident, since Izuku's not there, I'm going to replace it with Kendo. But since they don't have that powerful strength quirk, I see the ship sinking down as the villains would end up trying to take them over. Since no one would end up being there to save them, many of them would have to fight an ongoing battle in water. However, Suyu Asui would easily be able to take care of all these low-life thugs, as with her frog-like quirk, she would easily be able to swim all about, easily taking care of many of them. So, as the Nomu would end up destroying Aizawa, All Might would end up coming in and would end up destroying the Nomu, sending it flying off into outer space like Team Rocket would in Pokemon. So, with the Nomu gone, Shigaraki and them would end up leaving. However, they wouldn't see anyone who had a quirk similar to All Might's, knowing that Class 1A was significantly weaker than they had thought it was, seeing how their villains had easily been able to take care of many of the students, as All Might had to take care of the villains that were beating some of the students. Since there's only basically 2 very strong people now, and there's no top 3 in Class 1A with one for all being there, they only have Bakugo and Todoroki that can easily mop the floor with everyone, not having to basically work with a strategy, only relying on their overpowered quirks. So, as that would end up happening, the sports festival would end up beginning, and with the lack of Izuku, Bakugo would be seen getting first place, Todoroki in second, and so on and so forth. Bakugo, with the 10 million point headband, would easily explode everyone back, not caring what were to happen to him, just easily exploding everyone back, keeping them at bay, as they just couldn't get to him. So with Bakugo doing this, he would get first into the cavalry battle once more. And then the final exam would end up beginning. Not the final exam, I think I said, the final round, being the 1v1 tournament. Bakugo would easily get to the final place, as he would be versing Todoroki, as Shinso, who had to verse Kendo this time, I'm gonna say. So Kendo would easily be able to beat Shinso due to the help of the Monkey Court kid in their class. So, as Todoroki would also go up, the fight would go much like canon, as Bakugo would easily mop the floor with Todoroki, who still neglected to use his other half of his strong quirk. So, with Todoroki not just there, Bakugo would end up winning, as Todoroki would get second. Bakugo would still be tied up, completely pissed off that Todoroki had neglected to use his fire side of his quirk. Now, as all of this would end up being happening, Izuku's death would still be going on investigating, as it had been blown off by many people who were quirkless. However, All Might would end up wanting to continue this, being quirkless himself, knowing that they shouldn't just blow off this case, deeming it as something dumb or stupid like he simply just fell off. They should really investigate it, as the school does have cameras. However, many of them, or the police, just wouldn't care, being it's just a quirkless kid. It doesn't matter. They die all the time. They're just useless pawns in the game of life. So All Might would brush all of those police officers' words off and would continue on investigating this, where he would end up asking the school principal to see their cameras. The principal would know what had happened, having seen the footage, but wouldn't want to say anything. But he couldn't say no to the number 1 hero. As All Might would be watching the cameras, he would end up seeing in class as he would turn on the audio. "Why don't you go take a swan dive off the roof, don't you, Deku? Maybe then you'll be born with a quirk." As All Might would then pause it before looking down in shame. One of his own students, named Bakugo Katsuki, had told this kid to go kill himself. This is insane. How is this kid even trying to become a number? Why is he trying to be a hero? Why is he in UA in general? This shouldn't be allowed. As All Might would end up taking this footage and sending it off to Nezu, as All Might would tell Nezu that he needs to watch this footage at once, as there's a kid in Class 1A that shouldn't be there at all. He should be punished for this thing he did, this vile act of villainy, All Might would say. Nezu would be confused what was getting All Might so upset, looking over the footage as he would then realize that one of their star first years had actually been a bully the whole time. They had noticed a problem with Bakugo's personality and behavior, but they had just brushed it off, thinking nothing of it. Oh, maybe it's just because he has some sort of chemical imbalance in his brain or something. But no, he's been a bully all his life. This kid shouldn't be allowed in Class 1A. He shouldn't even be allowed in UA in general. As Nezu would then see this, he would then go over the intercom that Bakugo needs to stay after class, as Bakugo and the rest of Class 1A would just stare at him, wondering what Bakugo had done. Many of them, or many of his friends, would just say, "Oh, I guess you're in trouble now, Bakugo. I wonder what you might have done." As the internships would go on as normal, however, Ida would end up dying. With Izuku not there to save him, Ida would end up being killed by the hero killer along with the hero native, as Todoroki would not be there at all, being warned by Izuku. So with Ida and them gone, the class would return just in complete sadness, having the death of Ida. They couldn't deal with the death of their class representative, as they were just all shamed that they couldn't have saved him from the hero killer. Many of them growing hatred towards the hero killer, as Ito was one of their favorite students, as he was always on time, although he could be a pain many times, only following the rules, when sometimes you just gotta live your life on the edge a little bit. So we cut back to see Bakugo staying after class, as Nezu and All Might would walk in, glaring right at Bakugo, as Bakugo would ask what he did, as All Might would then shake his head before Nezu would sit in the desk in front of him. "Bakugo, would you like to confess to what your actions were? We know what you did, and I'm guessing you do too, as it's quite a serious offense." As Bakugo would just shake his head before looking at them. "We know what you did in middle school. Does the name Izuku Midoriya ring a bell to you?" Bakugo's eyes would then look on in shock directly towards Nezu sitting in front of him. Bakugo would shakily shake his head, trying to ward all of this stuff off, as if trying to play it off like Izuku never existed. Well, Nezu would then slide a tablet in front of Bakugo before clicking play. As the tablet would then play, as Bakugo would hear his own voice telling Izuku to take a swan dive off the roof. Bakugo would just slam up as his chair would go flying backwards before yelling at them that it was a stupid mistake that he shouldn't have done. As All Might would then tell him, "This isn't just some mistake you can brush off, Bakugo. You caused someone to kill themselves. Because of you, someone's mother is destroyed right now." As Bakugo would then look down in sadness once more, All Might and Nezu would both pick up on Bakugo's emotions before asking him, "So, do you finally feel an ounce of remorse, Bakugo?" As Bakugo would then tell him that Inko, Izuku's mother, had happened to die too. As without Izuku there, her pride and joy, she just had no reason to continue on living, as she would end up dying of a broken heart like a swan who just couldn't deal with anything anymore. They just couldn't live without Izuku, as that was the only thing that kept her going. As Bakugo would basically be responsible for the death of two people, as they really couldn't say he was responsible for it, but they sure could expel Bakugo for his vile behavior, and that's exactly what they did, expelling him, as Bakugo would rush off, not returning to the UA building at all, being forbidden from ever coming back within 100 yards of the building, as they couldn't fathom someone like Bakugo becoming a hero. As Bakugo, too ashamed he got kicked out of UA to go back to his parents, would end up living a life on the streets, homeless, stealing and committing other acts of crime to continue on living. How dare that Deku continue to rule over his life even after his death? This is so unfair, Bakugo would say. As Bakugo would continue on committing small crimes, but also stopping others, as he was sort of a vigilante, while also being more on the villainous side. Sure, he might stop a couple of muggings here and there, but he'd still rob places to end up surviving. as Bakugo just couldn't live with himself, he would continue down further into a path of villainy. His dreams of becoming a hero were completely lost as he started to hate the hero he once looked up to and admired as being All Might. He just continued on hating him, blaming Izuku and All Might for ruining his life even further, as Izuku would just not be able to do anything, looking down at the clouds, or looking down from the clouds at Bakugo's shameful life that he had fallen into. As the events would continue on, the class would all pass through, well, besides Bakugo, and who would take Bakugo's place? Well, this would be Shinso, as Shinso would take his place and would then be taught by Aizawa how to use his scarf thing, as they would then pass through the final exams, where they would then go to the training camp arc. Where the training camp would begin, Bakugo wouldn't be able to help any of them using his very powerful quirk defeat many of the villains. So, Class 1A would get injured quite a lot, and Kota, the small child that had happened to kick Izuku right in between the legs in canon, happened to be thrown off of a cliff by Muscular. As no one there to protect him, he would end up dying a sad death alone because Muscular had decided to finish off the family that he had started, showing Kota his eye that his parents had given him. Kota, of course, would use his quirk, but it would be deemed no use as he would be thrown off, as Muscular would then continue on going on a rampage, as the only person who could stop him there was Aizawa, who had already been badly beaten by many of the other villains there, would narrowly be able to erase Muscular's quirk, as the Wildcats, the heroes up there, would all pile onto him, tying him down, as he was still quite strong even without his quirk. So as the day would end up leaving, I see some of Class 1A and Class 1B being killed, as there wasn't some strong people that could do it. And with Izuku not coming in to help some of the heroes there, they would most likely get overwhelmed by the sheer amount of very capable and strong villains there. Being overwhelmed, some of the Class 1A kids, Class 1B, would get very insanely injured, and some would even die. And since they couldn't hide this from the public, UA would end up going under fire. As they were going under fire from the media and public, many of the class's parents would pull them out of the school, not wanting to have their child continue on being in a school where they could possibly be killed, as many of them would make groups to help just parents of killed people in attacks like that. As UA would continue on going under fire, people would continue on pull their students out even if they hadn't even dealt with anything, as many of their students would plead for them. Our parents did not do this, but their parents couldn't fathom losing their child. They couldn't fathom it, so they would pull them out, not wanting to lose their beloved child. So with UA continually going under fire, with the very few students left in Class 1A, they would continue on the school year, going through not even doing the just quirk apprehension test or the quirk licensing exam, as they just didn't have enough people to do it. They didn't have enough people in the class. Moving up even people from Class 1B and even Class 1C who volunteered to be moved up into the hero courses. They all thought they couldn't make it with their quirks, but now they could, because all of the other people who were in the hero courses had been pulled out, almost causing the UA's first year hero course to have to be dropped entirely. So as you now have these very people that have very weak quirks that aren't basically capable of being heroes, the next generation of heroes would be quite weak, as all of the people with the powerful quirks, their parents had happened to pull them out. The only person who had the strongest quirk in Class 1A happened to be Todoroki, as his father didn't care if he happened to die in a hero or being a hero or anything. That's just part of the job. You have to get used to that, not caring that there was his chance of his son being attacked every single day. So as this would end up happening, the year would then end up passing, as the class would then be known as Class 2B, or 1B, being now the second years, as they would continue on, and the Class 1A or Class 2A versus 2B wouldn't even happen. There wasn't enough people that were in it. Class 1B just got dropped. They didn't have enough people to do it. And so, as all of the UA students would end up passing, the next generation of heroes coming in would be quite weak, like I said. They weren't very strong. And if you have a rising villain by the name of Katsuki, then you are basically screwed. He has a massive explosion quirk, and the only person that could possibly stop him would be either Todoroki from the new incoming hero class, or one of the other veteran heroes. And so Izuku's death had caused just mass destruction of many things, including the downfall of UA. And with this hero class end up leaving UA would have to just stop their hero program. And with so much money funneling into that hero program and so many people only going to the school to be heroes, UA would end up shutting down, not having enough funding and people to go and do it. And so now UA gone, some of the teachers would not have secondary jobs to teach students, as heroes in general would end up being under fire, as the world would continue on just hating on hero schools, which would end up backfiring and flip-flopping onto heroes as well, as they were basically encouraging kids to become heroes, risking their life every day. As the League of Villains would love this, loving how the UA had shut down, they now didn't have to deal with it, and with their new rank member being Bakugo, they were unstoppable, as they would rise up, easily taking down many of the villains with their horde of Nomus, especially the high-ranking ones. They would easily be able to pass up throughout the ranks, destroying the hero society, where they would end up taking over, creating a life of miserableness, as many of the people who had hated on heroes, yelling for the destruction of hero schools, would end up just hating what they had done in their younger years, wishing that heroes were still being pumped out. However, it was no use. The world was now ruled by heroes and overlords, mostly being the League of Villains, and they had nothing to do about it. However, this was only the country they lived in, as many of the countries around them would end up looking on towards the villain-ruled, just the country of whatever country they lived in, as many of them would look on, seeing how the hatred towards heroes would end up backfiring immensely on them, where they would end up showing what not to do, as they now had a massive example. Do you want to live like this, a world known only of villainy and vile acts, as that's your leader? You don't want that to happen. You can't, just because a villain attacks our school once or twice, that doesn't mean you should take your student or your child out of hero school. And that is where this story comes to an end. This is what I do believe what would happen if Izuku would end up taking Bakugo's advice. The world would drastically change, as with the finding out of what Bakugo had done would lead him down a path of villainy, where hero schools would end up going under fire because Bakugo wasn't there and Izuku wasn't there. Many people would die during the training camp arc, basically causing people to hate on UA, causing it to shut down, and many more hero schools to shut down as well, following what UA had done. And that's what would happen. Izuku's death had led to the villains taking over the country, and that's all just because Izuku just happened to swan dive off of a roof instead of being captured by a sludge villain and meeting All Might for the first time. That's how this story can shift so easily, all by Izuku not even existing for most of the story. And that is where I'm going to leave the story off once again. I thank you all for watching. I'm wondering if you guys like this sort of story or not, because I've seen some stories not do so well, like long parts, and I'm just doing an analytical side of things, what would actually happen basically what I would think would happen. I'm just trying something new. I'm going to be trying some newer types of what ifs and anime content over the next couple of weeks, just experimenting, seeing what works and what doesn't, what you guys like and what you don't, just to basically not only have one style of content on my channel. So I thank you all for watching once again, and goodbye.